Thank you very much. For me, it's a pleasure for to be able to share this conversation with you, and we know each other for many many years, and I know that you've been focusing on the Chino Latino concept that you created many many years ago. Can you uh, remind me a little bit about?
Well, Alexis, like you, I'm working on a little bit of a hyphenated thing. You know, have you done that Afro-Cuban, medley with different elements? Well, I took to the Chinese art or Chinese tradition of painting many years ago. I came from an external perspective, right? I grew up in the Caribbean with a lot of Afro-centric notions. So China was very exotic. The art was to the point where I even said, I don't like this art. And thanks to college, through an education, through art history, I came to appreciate it, particularly because of ink. The fact that the Chinese tradition places such an emphasis on ink, on black ink, on monochrome things, brought me back to my first love, which is the comic books. Comic books, the ink. So I don't know, and I think your work has also some of that
Yeah.
blackness, some of that black line.
It's focusing mainly in the treatment of color, like you use the way you use the color because you have those colors that coming from the Caribbean. That's what you introduce, and that's what I identify very much with your work. And I use the color as a vehicle, as a stage to tell the story and the interpretation that each color has in the Afro-Cuban tradition and Afro-Cuban practices. I use each color that each color has his own voice, and also the use of charcoal
Charcoal.
as a vehicle. Like you use the ink, I use the charcoal that is very much used into some of the practices, as a to the beginners or the people that are introduced into the religions are marked with charcoal, so the spirits can smell the blood in some cases, and being marked with the charcoal. And the color is very much my way of my voice, trying to use it as a speaker for in my own way.
Well, that's funny that you say that because we were talking about ink and then you brought up charcoal, but you brought in color first. And now that you're saying that's your voice, well, that's what happened with Chino Latino. I mean, how can you improve or add to Chinese tradition when you're not even Chinese and that kind of thing? And I precisely what you mentioned, the color, the fact that I was bringing was a tropical color, something from the Caribbean, to the tradition in China, which has color, but the colors are more muted, are
Yeah.
more, But going back to your color in your work, I noticed, when I look at our colors, and some of them are very bright, and some of them are, primaries and reds and yellows and things like that. I find that my color, I go for maybe a silk screen effect, even though I'm painting
Yeah.
in oil. It's very flat sometimes, and there's something like sfumato. I like your color because your color can be very soft in some instances, and it's bright and everything. It's very saturated. But how do you achieve that sensuous softness?
In some cases, I use I mix it with coffee. Sometimes,
Oh.
sometimes I mix it with tea, especially when I use water-based colors. And I try to introduce some of the tradition, clearly into the world. Some of the the Afro-Cuban tradition, the drinking of coffee, and the tradition of sit down and have a cup of coffee. I introduce coffee into my work. So that softness, that settleness in the color is because sometimes I use coffee. Sometimes I mix the oil pigments with some kind of soils and
See, that I didn't know. I didn't know that. That's
with
fascinating.
soils, and trying to bring some authenticity or some identity into the work itself. When you get closer, you see the pictures. Pictures are pictures, but when you get close to the
Yes.
artwork, you can start seeing all the movement and all of the different meanings in the composition, which is what I'm trying to achieve, because Afro-Cuban traditions and Afro-Cuban painters are in Cuba all over the place, and everybody's very traditional, and all the artists are very much traditional and keep that tradition alive. I went out of that and I started using the color as as a vehicle into my own interpretation, and trying to communicate that in that sense. I don't know if I achieve it or not, but I'm gonna continue trying, because I enjoy it very much, and I know you do the same in your Chino Latino, which I met you when you was working on a different series, but it was like very much using almost the same line, but in that sense you was using like pencil. You was closer to the pencil. You wasn't using too much the ink transition. It was more focusing on the charcoal pencil or pencil lines, which I like. I like that horse that you was using in different examples of your work.
Well, that was a series based more on Afro-Latin sources, from Puerto Rico, Cuba, and Haiti and the Dominican Republic. But I was still doing some Chino Latino, and it's funny what you say. I mean, because you are differentiating yourself from other practitioners of let's say, Afro-Cuban traditions in painting, and yet yours are very different because of that color subjectivity. I have a similar issue in a different way. The issue is that I am not Chinese or Chinese descendant. And, Chinese painting is also very particularly conservative too. Like you have to sit a certain way, you have to build up paintings a certain way.
The ink have to be in a
certain consistency, blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to make sure from the very beginning that I wasn't going to be a China head. I don't have a Chinese girlfriend or wife. I don't drink tea. Like do tea ceremonies. I mean, all of these things I appreciate, but I'm not, particular. I didn't want to be like a guy that does also martial art or yoga.
You just did it for the love of art.
I wanted to come with enormous respect, with enormous knowledge, thanks to a very good training in art history and in very good places. Yes. But I also wanted to come from the Western perspective that the Caribbean afforded me, from a Western Caribbean perspective, which is a very cosmopolitan perspective because it's indigenous, it's exterminated indigenous Taino. It's Europeans that arrived in the Middle Ages or just after the Middle Ages, and it's the African tradition that you are so keen on in your own work. So there's another point of correspondence, I would say.
And you explore also the printmaking techniques in your work, which is very interesting because you mix those techniques that you've been developing with the Chino Latino into this series, and I like that duality, and I like that.
Do you print? I haven't seen so many prints.
I print very little, but I have some prints.
What's your format when you print? What do you like?
I like silk screen. I like serigraphy. I like calligraphy. I have some lithography as well, but very little, very very limited.
I practice all of them, and I particularly love lithography and etching. And yet, you need a studio. There are certain conditions that I don't readily have available. So my default mode has always been the silk screen, because in Puerto Rico, like in Cuba, after the revolution, particularly, you have all those silk screen posters from the ICAIC and such. Well, in Puerto Rico, we started with an offshoot of the WPA, the Works Progress Administration. They sent some money, they sent some people, and it was a cheap and effective way to disseminate information that was useful for us when we were in a transitional phase of society, like microbes, be careful with flies, they have microbes, so on and so forth. And out of that, we developed a very significant, for lack of a better word, print tradition in the middle of the 20th century. And I feel always that my silk screens are very much my acknowledgement, my sort of like thank you to the people that put Puerto Rico in the map, people like Don Lorenzo Mohr, people like Don Rafael Tufino, Don Carlos Raquel Rivera, Mirna Báez, Doña Mirna Báez, I suppose, may she rest in peace, Consuelo Gotay, who's still alive, this magnificent printer. So I've always been printing, and my prints are different from the China. China is such a long tradition. It's the oldest tradition perhaps in the world, right? But the print tradition, it's my Latin pop. It's my way of like having a little bit of humor, a little bit of joke, something that's not so. Not that I think of it seriously when I paint, but
But you take
help.
you have more fun and you have more freedom into
one-liners. Boom. Yeah.
I'm not explore too much the printmaking, but I'm having fun with the sculptures. I have a lot of
That's right.
I have a long line of sculptures, especially the interpretation of the African roots.
Mhm.
I'm using the African trees,
Mhm.
but I'm using the roots of the trees to make my sculpture. So I'm using that interpretation into the Afro-Cuban idea, even though the roots can be any kind of tree, as
Mhm.
long as they are they are from Africa. I use them, and they don't grow in Cuba, but I use it as an interpretation into my own work and trying to expand that Afro-Cuban perspective of my work.
You got any baobabs?
No,
No baobabs.
you know. But I using I'm been using for a few years the African teak, and then I'm keep expanding to installations and I'm using other traditional nails and which Louis and Steffenberg love my nails. He love my installation and my work with nails and steel nails. Rusted and very primitive.
Well, like those figures, which African tradition? The ones that you have the statue, the wood statues with all the iron, with all the
that I'm not an expert in the subject, but they are those figures are belong to the medicine man or person in the tribe. So those nails and those metal pieces in the figure are promises that after the person come to see the medicine man, those metal they come attached with a note, with the name of the person, what promises them. So I'm using that into my own work, and trying to keep that tradition and those rituals alive in the very straight line, even though sometimes you go up and down, but I'm trying to create that connection between my painting, the installation, and my sculpture.
Yeah, I haven't seen the installation so much. The last two shows were of painting.
No, it's pretty much painting up. I didn't. I mean, the last two shows I did drawing and painting. I didn't do much sculptures, but I'm working on some shows for.
Did I show you the last set of in pandemic? It's been so hard, and we've all were very scared and very alone, and that was terrible. But then it also. For visual artists, this was an opportunity to work. And I remember being shut off here at the Clemente Soto Vela Center, where I have my studio. And I was drawing a lot. Did I show you the pictures with the Mayans and the women?
Yes. Actually, we exhibited together not too long ago, about 2 years ago. Paper Trail. Remember that exhibition that you presented some of the Mayans, the Mayan drawings, and
definitely
some of the stuff, and I presented some of the circle drawings.
The tondos, tondos. Well, yeah, but those were not totally. Those were in color, and I've been doing this series now. Like it started in pandemic. I followed up on it, and they're derived from Maya codices, the ceramic codices, because a lot of the best Maya paintings were.
You haven't shown those.
Were in ceramics. I think we'll show some as we speak.
I know you've been mixing the Chino Latino and the Mayan concepts. You've been mixing it together. It's a very interesting concept. It's got some similarity, but also it's like some kind of a conversation or dialogue between the two concepts in the composition in the same painting. It's like
we've had some of that, and I teach art history in China in the summers, or I have taught for many years. Gone the art history 1, art history 2, over there, and then. And the Chinese are fascinated with the Mayans. It's funny. So maybe there is a link. Maybe there is, something in common between these two.
Well, the relationship between the rituals and the tradition into your art, into the art that we do, maybe have something to do with your work and
with your work.
That could be.
Absolutely.
I mean, we don't know. We're still exploring
what
we do.
The charcoal, the world. Anyway,
we're trying to keep it alive.
It's nice. It's nice that we have that.
Hi, here we are in our second meeting with Dario Mohr. He is the founder and director of Enclave. So Dario, can you tell us a little bit more what you're doing as curator and also as an artist?
I am, so I founded Enclave Arts Alliance, Inc. Really in 2011, I started with my curating, but it wasn't until 2018 that we became a nonprofit organization. And, it's just an opportunity for, BIPOC artists to be able to showcase their work in alternative ways, just kind of in alternative spaces, like here at the Queens Botanical Garden, where we're going to have the Enclave Garden Project Fellows, to this neighborhood, in part because I actually went to elementary school in Flushing. I went to PS20. And I would come here for school trips, and I've spent a lot of time here in my youth. So coming back and being able to engage with, what used to be, part of my neighborhood and my community is very exciting on a personal note. But also, it's just cool to be able to think about presenting work in a space and in a neighborhood where there aren't many galleries. There aren't, many people in this community maybe haven't really been to galleries like in, Manhattan and things. And it's just, and some people may even have feelings about art, like, and just feeling like they've been left out of the conversation. And, like it's just not really a part of their culture. So like, or at least contemporary art. So by having contemporary art here in an alternative space, hopefully it encourages people to, well, first of all, they get to experience it and appreciate it, but also hopefully it encourages them to realize that, they can engage with art and they do have a stake in, art and what kind of art is featured and who gets to showcase art and, just become a part of the conversation of contemporary art in general.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about your art? I saw your installations and they're amazing. They're abstract, but also they talk about tradition, about rituals. Can you tell us?
Yes, thank you so much, Graciela. So a lot of my work actually is inspired by sacred spaces, and I try to create these sacred spaces in sects of, of the Renaissance Italian masters particularly. So I, ended up really getting engrossed in that and just kind of really developing my painting skill after I graduated. After a while, I just, got a little bit sick of painting. And, it's just kind of one of those things where you hit a wall. Like you've been doing the same thing for a while, you're developing your skills still, but you need to focus on something else to reinvigorate your creativity. So I ended up getting into, I went back to school. I went to grad school at City College for my MFA. And there, a lot of the professors also were just like, we know that you can paint. We want to see what you can do to move the needle in the contemporary art conversation. And I was like really trying to figure out like, what can I do to show something new and still incorporate some of what I've learned, previously. And I've also, and also some of the other artworks that I pursued. I pursued fashion design for a while, and I was showing in New York Fashion Week, and I showed in Paris and in London Fashion Weeks and things like that. So, I kind of segued into different creative fields, but then I ended up kind of settling on contemporary art. And I decided, when I went back to school, I'm going to really focus on just creating, even if it's fashion, anything that I'm doing is going to be within the contemporary art realm. So, when I went back to grad school once again, that's when I decided, honestly, I took my first sculpture class there, and my professor wanted us to go around the room and just ask, like, what is the main takeaway you want to have from this class? And I just boldly said, I want to make freestanding sculptures, And I hadn't made a sculpture since, undergrad, which was like nearly 8 years ago. So, or 8 years prior. But, that class really inspired me. And, I just, I really took off with it. I started incorporating like, the painting and some of the, even some fashion pieces that I created. I started making fabric sculptures and just making larger installations with objects as well that I felt also referenced the work that I was creating. I work in series, so usually it's like I'm concentrating on a specific theme. And, I'll make multiple pieces that are sort of in some way an aspect of that theme. And I just found that like a major inclination for creating these series was sort of trying to seek some kind of spiritual or some kind of higher understanding.
by your work, and we wanted to present you to in Transborder Art because you are doing something that is very interesting, that is rituals, very spiritual connection, and I really want you to walk us through a little bit what you have done here.
A little bit more about it. Well, in order for you to get, I guess, ground us in, what's in the space, I need to show you some photos of the space. So I'm going to actually share my screen and share a few images from the show itself. 1 second, I'm trying to figure this out. So "Don't Let It Slip Through Your Fingers" is three artworks connected that are specific. It's kind of like a mantra, for me, and I hope that my audience can see, can kind of project something that maybe they lost, sort of like standing in for what I'm specifically highlighting, which is the ring. So I lost a ring that my grandmother gave me in 2019. And when I found this sort of like headstone that said 2019 on it, I just knew that I wanted to create this series. Don't let it. D stands for darkness. Animated the hand that animated the drawing. Though every chainmail scale of the dragon inked on my arm is permanent, I will never feel its constriction like yours. No, D stands for discover. Knowing she is in touch with the divine makes me want to reach for higher truth, though your fading imprint is an ever-present reminder of my fading devotion to her memory. Slip through. 2 years passed, and the vacancy has taken hold, staring down the mouth of the serpent of gold. I'd like to slip through the wormhole to bend the fabric of the darkness that blinds me. Without the presence of you, I venture into the tunnel without a lantern. My vision fixed ahead without light to anchor it. If I'm not careful, I could fall into the black void. But without you, all I can see is your absence. If I could slip through to that moment, I may find my way to reclaim you. If only I could slip through. Your fingers. The capital D makes up half of the letter P. She is the embrace I sought through this keepsake. She is the eye of the diamond that stared back in my face, guiding me through countless mistakes. And one day, I will visit her final resting place. Her name is Patricia Phillips. Until then, this ring is in memory of your fingers that once held my hand. Your fingers that designed this custom ring. This is in memory of your fingers. 1 second. So here, I'm sharing that, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up my website.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about each one. So you can say like a brief thing.
Graciela came prepared. She has photos of, I guess, some work that she really likes of my from my previous collection. These were super influential on me, even though I don't make any music. I was just inspired by their work. And I thought about them almost in, I thought about the music industry almost like a play, different roles that different musicians played, like in their persona that they brought to the table, the kind of archetypes that they represented in music. So I Got Life actually it seems to be a favorite of a lot of people. It's actually the smallest piece of the show. It's one of the smallest pieces I think I've made in the past 4 years.
This is amazing. It has a lot of passion. Love is losing.
Yep.
Why is it a losing game?
You have to ask her that question, the songwriter. So all of the
It's a beautiful piece.
what's spoiler alert, like all the titles for all these pieces are actually the song titles from the references that I used for this series. So this series was actually instrumental to I don't think the series that I have here at Flux would have been possible if this series wasn't created first, because Materials for the Arts is closed down. Well, they were closed through the pandemic, so like no one was able to really come and go, and that meant that my show was going to be virtual. And in order to be able to activate them, interact with them in a way that people can engage with, I needed to perform, the ritual. Usually I like to have people come and they can explore it and kind of interact with them in their own ways as they see fit. But since audience activation wasn't possible, I knew that I needed to activate them. And that's when I created this. There's actually a video of the activation ritual.